We got a thing we do when we begin. Here we go.
Yeah. Welcome to Crosstown Cardboard, episode 26, with my great friend Craig at New York City Sports Cards, the public school teacher in New York City. He's a math teacher, a soccer coach. Myself, Carmine at Carmine's Cards, the news and sports broadcaster, which seems like shouldn't even really be mentioned based on the sports broadcaster we have today. My former coworker at ESPN, which is the least notable thing on his resume. 17 years at ESPN, Kevin Negandhi, Sports Center anchor, college football on ABC host, big Philly guy. Kevin, thank you for taking a little time to join us here on Crosstown Cardboard.
Carmine, Craig, thank you for having me. Glad to chop it up with you guys.
All right, so let's get into it. We only got about half an hour. Kevin, Craig and I did a little research. We know you went to National back when the last time it was in Rosemont, Illinois, and you told the story about how you got back into the hobby, opening up some old stuff. Like a lot of us, same thing as me during the pandemic. You're bored, you rekindle the love for the hobby. So what were some of the cards you saw when you opened up some old boxes that made you remember, wow, I really love this stuff?
So I had, when I really got into it, it was, before your time as well as Craig's. It was the late 80s. So I had like two separate things. I had binders and binders of, Score, Pro Set, NBA hoops when they first came out, and the David Robinson card was a big deal. And, the Pro Set stuff, I love the Score with the green border, the Barry Sanders rookie year. So I put a few things to the side. Of course, the Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. 89 card, where I thought, I'm going to stash this stuff, Barry Bonds' rookie. I'm going to stash all this stuff, and many years from now, I'm going to be rich. I think what any 14-year-old, 15-year-old dreams about, that's kind of what I had. So when I went through all that, I had basically sheets of, my Bo Jackson collection, my favorite athlete of all time, sheets of Randall Cunningham. And it was just great to go down memory lane, especially with my young boys who I got into card collecting as well. So it was cool to kind of tie everything together. And there's also another thing. There's a timeline that was kind of crossing together. My wife started bringing home packs from, Target and Walmart. So my boys who are now 10 and 8, but a few years ago, they're, 6 and 4, they're opening packs. And they're pulling out Trae Young's and Luka Doncic's rookies. And I knew at the time, I was like, all right, you guys can have these. Daddy's going to put these away. And so there were a couple of Lukas, the NBA hoops, all blue border, that I was like, this is a unique one. I'll put away. And, my oldest didn't understand at the time, and I was like, trust me. And right around the pandemic, I pulled some of these out, and I was like, look at the value of what these cards are, specifically when Luka and Trae were blowing up. Unaware of, we're going through a lot of, I would say, the early 90s, where basically they were overproducing the market.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think everybody's seeing that right now. We're going through another cycle in the last 2 years where the overproduction, and look at the Luka Prism, right? Like when you look at all the PSA 10s out there, it just makes me sad. Same thing with Zion. So all of that got tied in together. And then, I went to a local card store in Connecticut. Love the guy who runs it, Ideal Cards, Alex. He was phenomenal with my kids. Phenomenal. And he got them in it. And the next thing you know, I went on a spree for about 5 months, right around the peak of cards, because I think a lot of us had extra time, and a lot of us love the idea of rekindling our childhood. And the next thing you know, I'm buying Mosaic and Prism packs, and all in the basketball craze, right in the bubble. And then I started going back and adding to my collection of stuff that I grew up with, pursuing certain cards that I wanted, and also like going back into my love for, NFL rookies, and then kind of saying, all right, I got to get the mainstays in baseball, like the Mike Trouts and the Mookies, and went after a few Shoheis. So it just continued to grow.
Craig, I know you're going to ask a question here, probably related to the Philly fandom, as we see the Phillies and Eagles pennants in Kevin Negandhi's background here. But I wanted to show Kevin this flawless one-of-one, since he mentioned Bo Jackson, this auto that I got, if you're watching on the YouTube.
Carmine, you're just rubbing it in. And he's wearing the 34 Raiders. Like that to me is one of the perfect uniforms that has ever been worn by an athlete. And to me, he's the greatest athlete of my time. So that is a beautiful card. So you're lucky.
And a 101.
Yeah, let me know if you're ever selling it.
All right.
I love it. Future deals in the making here. But Kevin, it's fun to hear you just geeking out about cards you like, teams that you like. Can you kind of talk about how collecting with your kids has enhanced this experience and how that ties into your Philly fanhood? Because I asked a friend, I said, hey, we're getting Negandhi on. What's the first thing that comes to mind? My friend said, Eagles fan. So talk about how that impacts the cards you look for when you go to these shows.
Yeah, I'm a degenerate when it comes to Philadelphia sports, and I'm not shy about it. And so opening packs with the family, we made it a family thing. I've got also a 6-year-old daughter, and my wife loves sports too. So whenever we get a box, everybody picks the number, which pack they want. You know, my oldest loves the 1, and I'll always ask for the 5th one. My second one always goes with the second. So like they have their own little nuances, and I didn't just sit there. Usually it would be me opening it. Now I don't open the packs. I usually am with my daughter, making sure she's opening it clean so there's no busted edges. And then, for us, it's just cool. We're looking for, of course, rookie cards that they can identify with, and then players that they love. And they also share the same thing with me. We get a Bryce card. We get a Jalen Hurts card, Devontae Smith card. They're losing it. The cool thing is we've gone to card shows, and they'll look for certain guys like a Tyrese Maxey. My oldest, his biggest purchase was a pretty nice Tyrese Maxey Obsidian all black rookie card, and he was like, I want this card, and I was like, tell me why. Let's explain. Let's talk about the whole thing. And the price point was a little high, so he went and he started the negotiation with the guy who was selling it. And then at one point I was like, listen, I'll go heifers with you. If you like this card, though, you got to put it in the right spot, understand the value. So it's a combination, Craig, where we are sharing a common theme. I think it's a memory, but we're also learning about value, your own dollars, spending it. Why is this important to you? What's this going to have down the road? And we're not just in the business of flipping. Like, this is something that's part of your PC, right? And I think that's important because we can get sucked into the idea of flipping. And as a result, you can get really burned, as we have seen over the last 3 years of people making big purchases and then getting just basically the music stops and you're caught with this. So you better like the card. It better be part of your PC collection if you're going to make a big investment. And so, my boys will come home and they'll be like, I want this card, that card, this card. And I'm like, all right, so why do we want that card? What kind of trades are we going to do? And I make sure that they understand that they have an attachment to the card with the identity of the card, the same way I had it when, I was collecting the Ken Griffey Jr. card. Growing up, I wanted to always get the Fleer 86 on Jordan. So I didn't have the money. And back then, that would have been a phenomenal bargain of a deal if I would have got it for $100. So it's like understanding that. Now, the cool thing is this, too. Back in '89, I'll never forget that the score rookie, the score set was incredible. Of the NFL set that came out, and they had Troy Aikman, Derek Thomas, Barry Sanders, Deion Sanders, Broderick Thomas. Those 5 guys that were part of the draft. I basically, at the store at 14, I had like $4 in my pocket. I bought those 5 cards for $0.25 a piece. And then, I opened up, I put them in plastics and stuff 30 years ago. I opened it up during the pandemic, and I was like, oh, I'm going to send this to PSA. They all look pretty good. And 2 of them came back as 9s. And so you sit there and you're like, oh, man, I made
Nice.
a quarter investment in 1988, 89, or, the year I did it. I forget now. And I've come back and I can reap the rewards here, 30 years later as somebody who loves it, who's a fan of the sport.
Wow. So you let time do its thing. And that's why we always talk about, I always say, what do I want my collection to look like in 10, 15, 20 years from now? And your kids are just at the beginning stages of that.
Yes.
So that's super fun to help them build that foundation in their collection that hopefully they can look at down the road.
Yeah. Totally. And that speaks exactly to Kevin, because Craig has his card club at his high school. And, people have modeled his same thing, with the after school program and teaching the high school kids the same lessons that you're teaching your kids. And it was funny, the connections that you were talking about with the 76ers, and you being from West Philly, Phoenixville, PA, Temple graduate, clearly a big Philly guy. I think you interned with the Phillies. How has the Philly fandom influenced what you collect now? Because we heard about the nostalgia piece during the pandemic, but what are you looking for now, and what's the Philly influence on those cards?
I love anything Joel Embiid does, clearly, with that connection. The Jalen Hurtses, the Devontae Smiths. Clearly, you're going to go with quarterbacks. And then whenever I get anything that's Philly related, I put it aside, no matter what.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I look at it. I wish Bryce Harper was as a collector, I wish Bryce Harper was a Philly draft pick, right? Because you want to get the rookie card and has the Nationals on it. Now I have his rookie card, but that connection's always cool. I'm going to pull the, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to push the buttons and get a Mike Schmidt rookie. I haven't yet, because it's like I want to make sure I get the right one. And I want to make sure it's at the right price point, because Mike Schmidt's my guy growing up. As I try to be Mike Schmidt growing up. So those are the connections that I have, and I think that carries through. But also, to what you just brought up, Carmine, I think what Craig's also doing is it's great, because we see, man, I see some hustlers that are 12 and 13 years old, especially at the National and backpacks, where they got 50 grand of cards in their backpack, and they are wheeling and dealing like it's nothing. And I think that is incredible, because they are future entrepreneurs understanding business. And I make sure, I went to the National by myself a couple years ago. It was my first experience. I was going to take my 2 boys to Atlantic City last summer, but my oldest was in a phenomenal baseball tournament. He made it to the state Final Four. So I was like, we can't go to the National. So I'd still like to go to the National this year with them, so they could see, many of these high school kids that Craig talks to and deals with, so they can understand. Because listen, I'm still my boy's dad, but if they see kids that are relatable to them, they're going to be like, oh, I went in on this. I want to understand more of this. I want to understand that it's bigger than just, hey, I want just one card. Understand why they want one card. Why do you get to this point? And they're 10 and 8. So we're in the early stages of explaining that to them.
Kevin, I love that you show up to these shows just as a regular collector, because that's what you are. You're just going with your boys, having a good time collecting cards. I don't know if you ever had the conscious thought of how valuable it is for people like yourself, let's just call it celebrities for argument's sake, to just be immersed into the scene, into the hobby, into the culture, and just walking around these shows with anyone else. Like I saw at the Philly show recently, there were a whole bunch of 76ers that were there. Can you just talk about how valuable that is for the growth of this hobby, to see athletes and TV personalities to be a part of this?
It is pretty cool to see athletes involved and understanding. I also think it gives credibility to I think a hobby that is trying to find its way. And when I say that is, like, you guys are relatively young. you're talking to high school kids who are relatively young getting into it. But there was a segment that was just in the hobby, and that was like an exclusive group that no one else was in. And I think by that point, sometimes you can kind of get groupthink and you can stay in one space, and it's like you're not expanding to diversity. We're seeing a lot more women in cards. We're seeing a lot more people of color in cards. I think that plays a huge role and opens the door for the market. And to me, that it just helps everything. Now, you have that 2-year window where cards explode, and then a whole bunch of people dip in and then dip out, and then I think you abandon all the aspects of why you got into it in the first place. You have too many flippers. And I think that hurts the economy of the card space. So when you have some credibility, you have people that you could recognize that are in it. I think it helps enhance why you're in it. It brings more attention. It opens the door to bringing more future collectors. And I think that plays a big role. I think NFTs really hurt the card space. Top Shot comes, and then a lot of the money goes to the NFTs. Then all of a sudden you lose that space. And I understand that I'm still new to the space coming back in. So there are so many other phenomenal people in this business who have had success long-term that understand it a lot more than me. And I just sometimes shut up and listen to them because they know that there are going to be highs and lows. We're going to have dips and valleys all the time. But the true mainstays, I would love to see if we could build that even more, that no matter where the market is, high or low, we're going to still have consistent people coming into the market, not feeling like they're going to get burned, right? And I think Fanatics plays a huge role in this. I think they've got smart people, and I think they're going to do the right thing by collectors. At least I hope. I've been pretty disappointed in some of the productions Panini's put out. Sometimes you're like, oh, what are we doing? I hope it's not just a money grab here, because some of this stuff has been really, you question the overproduction, the mass production of some of the stuff that's out there. And I think there's still a joy of opening packs. And I want to make sure that's still going on here for people that are coming into the business and coming into the hobby, that they get still the thrill of opening packs no matter what. They want to come back and do more of it instead of feeling like they're getting burned.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you were speaking about, Kevin, advancing the hobby, getting some positive exposure on it, which is what you were doing not too long ago with your podcast or your interview show with the founder of StockX, Josh Luber, where you guys were, as you put on your Instagram, chopping it up. StockX is a place where you can buy, sell sneakers, clothing, electronics, and trading cards. And so I'm not asking for any intellectual property here, but what are some of the talks at ESPN about reigniting a show like that, or getting hobby content into the mainstream on the worldwide leader?
So I don't know what all those talks are. I can tell you, Carmine, I've pitched a lot of conversational ideas over the last 3 years in that space. It's just really hard to find a platform. Now, ESPN Plus, they're looking for more programming, and there's always space there potentially down the road. It's just a matter of investment. Anything with your background, also, anything ESPN does, they're going to make sure they do top shelf production value. So how much can they dedicate to that right now? I can't speak to that. I can tell you that, what we did was a lot of fun, and it was set up on a ESPN YouTube channel, and we loved it. And, I still think that there's an opportunity for that down the road. Also takes time. It takes the idea of finding it on a channel where it can maintain an audience consistently. Our first time that we did it, the numbers were great, and it's just finding a space where we can have consistent numbers, and also finding time. Ventured into a handful of other projects since his StockX experience, and then I've got a full schedule as well. It's just finding the time to do it and making sure we can. If we cannot hold it to a certain standard that Josh and I have when it comes to value of studio production and consistency, we're not going to shortchange the viewer. And that means we're not going to just put out a podcast or a YouTube thing and then schedules get conflicted. And then it's like we can't be consistent about it because I just don't think that's fair to the audience. But I'm always open. I'm always open to the idea if carving a niche and moving forward is there, that I'll stick my hand up. And if I'm considered, I'd gladly say yes.
Well, Michael Rubin has been on record saying they're trying to grow this hobby 10x. So you got to assume with that, there's going to be opportunities for additional content. And we're definitely big Michael Rubin fans. We think he's the right guy to lead this charge here. I am dying to know. So we all watch you anchor ESPN. Obviously, there's a lot of conversations about highlights and athletes. Has there ever been a moment where you're speaking about an athlete or a team and the thought comes into your head like, I wonder what this guy's Prism Silver's doing right
now? Yeah. And by the way, to add to you, Michael is great. Michael Rubin's, I think, a visionary, and he's great for the hobby. And I think just look at the growth of what Fanatics has done when it comes to merchandise, and Rubin's been behind that. So I think that's phenomenal for us collectors to have Fanatics tied into what they do and understanding the space. And when it comes to athletes and stuff, Mbappe, I did a highlight a couple years ago with Mbappe, and I brought up, his PSA 10 rookie card. And I think about it every now and then. I'll look at my, when we get a shot sheet which has highlights and I see a player on there, I'll look up every now and then the card value at the moment, whether it's Card Ladder, whether it's, eBay, you're if you can kind of find a way to slide that in there where it's relevant but not over the top, I'll find a way to do it. It's just making sure it's appropriate, Now, the cool thing is, Craig, to your point about athletes, opening up the college space as well. We're seeing more and more of that, and that's pretty cool. If you could do a college football highlight, now you have the Bowman autos that are out. Especially for a player that's back, and Caleb Williams, something with tops, where you could talk about, is that his rookie card, the USC card, right? So I think you're going to see more and more of that stuff in the conversation piece, which I always think about if I can do a highlight.
Love it. Love to hear that. I was hoping it crosses your mind while you're on the broadcast every once in a while.
Isn't it popping like a PSA 10?
Yeah, that's what I did. Yep, Carmine. Popping like a PSA 10, yes. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
there you go.
I'll save that, and if I get a highlight down the road in the next couple of weeks, I'll make sure I'll bring it up and think of you guys.
My man.
All right. Well, Kevin, we only have about 5 minutes left with you here, so I wanted to talk about, you mentioned inclusion in the hobby, and I mean, you are clearly paving the way. First Indian American to ever serve on a national sports network. Of course, that includes anchoring SportsCenter. Craig is at a predominantly Black and Hispanic high school teaching these kids, in the card club. What are some ways that you think the hobby can be more inclusive to the non-status quo of the middle-aged white guy?
I just think a card show is exposure, right? Like, I think that helps. I think you guys, I've seen a handful of, podcasts where, women are empowered and showcased for what they do. I think more of that plays a role in this. I've run into many people who are minorities that collect, and it's just, I don't think there's a point where it's just like, oh, things are not fair for minorities in this space. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's just basically when you're at a card show, when you see somebody of color hosting a table, to me, that's great. That opens up the space. When you see young kids of color or girls who are walking around, I think that they should be celebrated, and they should, to me, encouraged. That we need more of that, because I just think it expands things outside of something that we're used to. And it's okay to be uncomfortable, to understand that it's not really that they don't want to collect. It's just they haven't been exposed to the idea of collecting, right? And if you could just have more exposure of that, whether it's more on, having guests, in the podcast space of people of my background, or, more females. And I'm not saying you specifically have not done that. I'm just saying anybody that does that when it comes to a medium, I think that's how you can enhance the conversation, because in reality, we all share the common theme. We love the space. We love collecting. We get the same thrill and the same excitement. And if we could just pass that on to the next generation, I think you're just opening doors to more collectors, which I think will benefit for everybody. Because I think the more collectors you have, the more opportunities you have for trading, understanding other people, why they collect what they collect, what's important to them. I think all that stuff plays a big role. And if somebody's at home saying, well, what can we do? How can we understand that? I'm not saying I have a solution. I'm just saying encourage people that may not look like you to get in the space. Encouraging people when you see them at shows. I think there are a handful of ways, follow, like there's a handful of phenomenal Instagram accounts. Follow people that may not look like you to kind of gain an idea of what they're into and why they're collecting. I think you'll find out you'll have a lot more in common with them, with somebody that doesn't look like you that's in the card space than you would, assuming you would not, because there's still that same passion no matter what, and the only comparison I can make here is we all have different tastes, right? Somebody that can look like me, who's Indian American, can show up at a card show and say, I just want WWE cards. That's not my space. Even though they look like me, we have a different, flavor. Carmine, you and I don't look like each other. Craig, you and I don't look like each other, but we can still have the same common interest in a certain sport. I think that we got to get over the idea that, hey, somebody doesn't look like me, they won't have the same common things that I like. And I think you'd be really surprised that there are so many people that don't look like us, and they have the same common interest in collecting in the hobby. And you could expand yourself by being open-minded about the process.
Yeah, I'm so happy you said that, Kevin, because before we wrap it up, I wanted to talk about, of course, we all have a career in sports. I mean, I'm in sports broadcasting. You're obviously in sports broadcasting. Craig is in soccer coaching, and just the equal playing field that it puts everybody on, regardless of race, religion, background, is one of the great things about sports cards and sports, just in general. I wanted to talk about when I worked at ESPN real quick before we head out, a moment of how you were so inclusive being in, the well-known position that you were as an anchor, treating us production assistants. I remember distinctly when you invited us over to the same house you're sitting in there for a Philadelphia Eagles game. Not only did you invite the adult members of the show staff, but you invited us kids, straight out of school. And me and my buddy are driving over. We're like, we're going to Kevin Negandhi's house to watch a football game. This is pretty cool. And that was in December 2017. Carson Wentz tore his ACL in that game against the Rams. But I think you guys were all right because you ended up winning the Super Bowl 2018 with Nick Foles on that magical run. So I just wanted to thank you for being so welcoming at that time, inviting us little fish over to your house. And then, in like the lunch line, asking us where we're from, how's it going? And just to your point about the inclusion in the hobby, your inclusion to us at ESPN meant so much. So I'd imagine it would mean the same to somebody in the sports card collecting space.
First off, Carmine, good memory. And I will say this, anybody that is in a position of management, or like you described the adults in the room, right? We've all been in the situation that many of the 20-year-old PAs are in at ESPN. We've all been there. And I was very lucky when I was, 19, 20, 21. And I did 5 internships in college, and I just basically went into rooms with adults not knowing what was going on. And many adults, I was very lucky, pulled me to the side and told me, hey, this is what I think you should do. This is why you should do it. I asked questions constantly. They were all great for me. And one specific mentor of mine who passed away, the late, great Gary Papa at the ABC affiliate in Philadelphia, he was a legend there. And he didn't have to take the time out with me, and he was just like, when you get to this position, you've got to pass it on. That's all I want. And it really stuck with me because I wouldn't have been in that position without his help. And now I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in without your help. When you were a production assistant, you guys make us look good. You guys are the ones that are grinding every day, doing stuff behind the scenes, making sure. And when I describe what we do on TV, the best way I can describe it to anybody that, comes in on a tour or friends of mine or family who want to understand, I'm like, listen, we're on the air. We are known as the quarterbacks. And what happens when you watch TV, the quarterbacks get criticized a lot more than they deserve, praised a lot more than they deserve. But behind the scenes, if I don't have the line blocking, if I don't have the receivers running the right routes, if I don't have the running back doing what he's supposed to do, if I don't have the right play call, well, I look like a fool. Same thing with TV. If I don't have the production assistants helping and cutting the tape and making sure it's the right way and the shot sheet's done and all the stuff that they grind 10 hours a day to make us look good, if I don't have the right producer, putting together a good rundown, if I don't have the right camera people, if I don't have the right segment producers and the right analysts, we're not putting together a good show. The same way we're not putting together a good game plan as a quarterback, right? So I think all of that stuff together for people to understand how TV works. You see somebody on TV and you think, this is easy. Now, there are so many other people behind the scenes that make us look good that are doing so much more than you understand. And you were one of them. And I also know that many of you guys are coming from all parts of the country, and you're living in this small town in Bristol, Connecticut, trying to find your way. And it's important, especially that was right around the holidays, that you guys are coming to somebody's house and you can have some food. You're not wasting, I think a day where you're like, what am I going to do today? It's a chance to just say, listen, you're part of our extended family. And I'm honored that you guys can come to our house and experience that. We do that every year with a Christmas party. It's really important to us. And we believe in it, me and my wife, because we're fully aware of what people do. And that draws into this conversation. What Craig's doing with the high school kids, he's believing in them. And he's understanding that when they get older, he's changing their lives right now. When they get older, they're going to look back and be like, that was really cool of, the teacher that we had, treated us like we should be treated. And so I'm grateful for what you did, Carmine. I just ask that, the stops that you are in this business, that you understand and help out the next generation that comes up, because that's the least that we can do in this very tough field.
Yeah, no, very well said, Kevin. That meant a lot to me. And I know the time that you spent here with us on Crosstown Cardboard, 5 years later, also meant a lot to me and Craig. And it sounds like Craig might be having a class coming in. I know you have to get going, Kevin. So I'll give Craig the last word to close us out here for just an awesome time spent talking.
I love what you said about always giving back to those who are coming up, and cars and the hobby is the same thing, right? So if you're an adult at a show and you see the kids, I think it's valuable. Take the time, teach these newcomers a little thing or two. And we're very big on this podcast about education, teaching the next generation. So I love that you said that. But we are so grateful for the time. Thank you for being a positive member of this space. We are going to continue to watch you do your thing on ESPN, and hopefully we run into you in Chicago this year at the National.
That'd be great. Yeah, and if so, that'd be fantastic if we can get the chance to hang out a little bit and talk about. I'd love to see what you guys collect, what's part of your PCs, and to me, like Craig, you brought up one thing too, and this is also applicable at the card show as well as local card shows. When I took my two sons to a local one, we had a bunch of stuff laid out, and there were so many adults that went up to my kids asking about the cards, creating conversation, buying cards that they didn't even really want, but they were making sure the kids were involved. Like, as adults, we should be mindful of that when we're at card shows, because I think it changes the kids' approach moving forward. Be supportive, because you're bringing in, I think, lifetime collectors by those relationships.
Wow. Clip that. That was well said.
100%. We got some great stuff here, Kevin. And again, really appreciate the time, and definitely talk to you soon about some advice in the real career along with the podcast. But thanks so much for spending some time with us here.
Thanks, Kevin. We really
you got it,
appreciate
Carmine. Thank you so much. Craig, thank you for what you're doing with the kids, man. Take care.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll talk soon. Bye.